A decorated Navy SEAL, a routine walk, and a cop with something to prove. What happens when the wrong person is stopped for the wrong reason? As tensions rise and the truth starts to unravel, the power dynamic shifts in a way no one saw coming. How far will this confrontation go before the tables finally turn? Let us know in the comments section below. Cindy Wilson had barely made it 5 blocks before she heard the screech of tires behind her. She didn't flinch. Years of training had conditioned her not to. Still, she knew what was coming. The moment she stepped off the bus, she had seen the looks. The quick, subtle glances from people who didn't recognize her, the quiet assumptions being made in their heads. She had been gone for years, but nothing had changed, not in this town. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and kept walking, her posture steady, her pace even, but she heard the car door open, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the pavement. "Hey, you, hold it right there." Cindy exhaled through her nose and slowed to a stop. She turned smoothly, no sudden movements, and faced the officer. Brent Holloway. She didn't recognize him personally, but she knew the type. She'd seen men like him overseas, men who thrived on control, who carried authority like a weapon and expected submission in return. His eyes swept over her, narrowing slightly as they landed on the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" His voice was firm, laced with suspicion. Cindy tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I grew up here," she said. Holloway's expression didn't change. If anything, his stance stiffened. "Where are you headed?" Cindy took a slow breath. She could feel a few people watching from the sidewalks, their interest piqued by the sudden stop. "My grandmother's house," she replied. Holloway nodded once, but his hand hovered near his belt, close to the holster, close enough to make a statement. "I need to see some ID." Cindy didn't move. She had dealt with enough of these situations to know how they played out. She asked. Suspicious behavior. Her jaw tightened slightly, but her expression remained calm. "What exactly about me is suspicious?" "You're carrying a large bag, walking through a high-crime area, and you're being difficult." Cindy almost laughed. Being difficult. That was the favorite excuse, wasn't it? She had trained alongside some of the toughest soldiers in the world, but standing here, in her own neighborhood, she was suddenly a suspect. She shook her head. "I'm just trying to get home." "Then there shouldn't be a problem showing me some ID." There it was. The power play. The unspoken, "do as I say, or this gets worse for you." Cindy's patience was thinning. "I don't have to show you anything if I haven't done anything wrong." The small crowd that had gathered started murmuring. A young woman, early 20s, phone in hand, was already recording. Cindy caught her eyes for a brief moment. Holloway noticed too. "Put the phone away," he barked. The woman didn't move. Cindy exhaled. She reached into her bag, moving slowly, deliberately. She pulled out a slim leather case and held it up. "Here." Holloway snatched it from her hand and flipped it open. His eyes skimmed over the words, the title at the top. Lieutenant Cindy Wilson, United States Navy SEAL. The change was instant. His fingers twitched, his expression faltered, his shoulders tensed in the way a man does when he realizes he's stepped into something much bigger than he was prepared for. Cindy waited, arms crossed. Holloway handed the ID back, clearing his throat. "Military, huh?" Cindy tucked it away. "That a problem?" He stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "No," he muttered. "No problem at all." Angela, the woman recording, smirked behind her phone. "Oh, you messed up, officer." The crowd chuckled. Holloway's jaw tightened. Cindy had seen this before. He wanted to push back, to save face, but he knew he couldn't. Not here, not now. Not when the evidence was already being uploaded to the internet. "Have a good day, officer." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, fists clenched, as the whispers and laughter followed him down the street. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Holloway's fists clenched at his sides as Cindy walked away. He could hear the murmurs of the crowd, the suppressed chuckles, the sharp-edged whispers. His ego had taken a hit. He wasn't used to losing control of a situation. His gaze darted to Angela, the woman with the phone still recording. She was grinning, shaking her head as she whispered something to a man beside her. More people had gathered now, pulled in by the scent of conflict. Holloway had a decision to make. He could let her go, pretend this never happened, and hope the video didn't make the rounds. Or he could find a way to reassert himself. He had already lost the first round. That wasn't going to happen again. He turned sharply. "Hey, you... stop!" Cindy sighed before even turning around. She knew it was coming. She had hoped, just for a second, that he'd be smart enough to let it go. She pivoted slowly, her expression neutral, unreadable. "What now?" Holloway marched toward her, his boots heavy against the pavement. His face was flushed, his jaw locked. "I need to check your bag." Cindy's patience was running on fumes. "For what?" "Drugs, weapons, contraband." "Pick one." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Angela let out a low, amused chuckle. "Oh, wow, you really don't know when to quit." Cindy stared at him, unmoving. "You're asking a Navy SEAL if she's smuggling drugs?" "You heard me." Silence stretched between them. The crowd was still. The moment was fragile, waiting to tip one way or the other. Cindy exhaled through her nose. "This is the part where I remind you that you need probable cause," she said, voice smooth, even. "And right now, all you have is a bruised ego." Holloway took a step closer. "I don't need a reason." Cindy raised a brow. "That's not how the law works." His lip curled. He was struggling, fighting to keep the upper hand. "Open the bag." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A teenager in a hoodie muttered, "Damn, she really said no again." Angela zoomed in on Holloway's face. "You sure you want to do this, officer?" His gaze snapped toward her, and for a second, Cindy saw rage, a flicker of something barely contained. His fingers twitched toward his belt. The murmurs stopped. Cindy's muscles tensed. Holloway's hand hovered over his holster, the air between them electric. Then, from the distance, a new voice. "Officer Holloway." The tension shattered. Sergeant William Tate, an older black officer with tired eyes and a crisp uniform, was making his way toward them, his expression unreadable. Holloway stiffened but didn't turn. Cindy remained still, waiting. Tate stopped beside them, his gaze sweeping over the scene, the crowd, the phones, Cindy's stance, Holloway's hand still too close to his belt. "Tell me," Tate said, voice level, "why a decorated Navy SEAL is standing in the middle of the street with her hands full while you're trying to escalate a situation that should have been over 10 minutes ago." Holloway's face twitched. She refused to comply. Tate sighed. "And I'm guessing the part you're leaving out is the part where she didn't actually do anything wrong?" The crowd snickered. Angela grinned. "I like this guy." Holloway bristled. "Sarge, You were just about to put yourself in the middle of a PR nightmare, Holloway." Tate's tone was sharp, clipped. "And I don't have the energy to deal with this today." "She was being difficult," Holloway muttered. Tate's brow lifted. "Difficult," he echoed. "You stopped a black woman for walking, tried to flex your authority, and when she didn't immediately crumble, you kept pushing?" Holloway didn't answer. Tate shook his head. "You and I both know how this looks," he continued. "Hell, it probably doesn't even matter what I say at this point. That video's already on the internet, isn't it?" Angela wiggled her phone. "Oh, yeah, definitely trending." Cindy said nothing. She didn't need to. Tate exhaled through his nose. "All right. Let's be real, Holloway. Do you actually think this woman is a threat?" Holloway didn't answer. Tate turned toward Cindy, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Wilson," he said. "You good?" Cindy nodded. "Trying to be." Tate sighed again. "Then I suggest you be on your way. And, Holloway?" Holloway flinched. Tate leaned in. "Try thinking next time before you get yourself fired." The crowd erupted into laughter. Angela cackled. "Whoa! You love to see it." Holloway's jaw was locked so tight Cindy thought his teeth might crack. His hands twitched at his sides, but he said nothing. Nothing at all. Cindy adjusted her bag and stepped forward. "Appreciate the backup, Sergeant." Tate dipped his head. "It's what I do." And just like that, she was gone. Holloway was still standing there when the crowd finally started to disperse, his face red, his fists trembling. The moment was over. But the damage, that had already been done. The video spread like wildfire. By the time Cindy Wilson reached her grandmother's house, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages, missed calls, notifications piling up. She ignored them at first, letting the world react while she sat at the kitchen table, watching her grandmother, Miss Etta, hum a soft gospel tune as she stirred a pot of greens on the stove. "You gonna check that phone, baby?" Miss Etta asked without looking up. Cindy sighed. "I already know what it's about." Miss Etta gave her a knowing glance over her shoulder. "That fool cop, right?" Cindy let out a small laugh. "You saw it." Miss Etta tapped a wooden spoon against the pot and turned fully. "Saw it. The whole church group's seen it. Sister Geraldine sent it to me talking about, 'Isn't this your Cindy?'" She huffed. "Like I ain't raised you with enough sense to handle yourself." Cindy shook her head and finally checked her phone. The video had over 100,000 views. It had been shared by local activists, news outlets, and even a few military accounts, praising her composure. The comments were a flood of outrage and a Navy SEAL being harassed on her own street. This is America in a nutshell. She could have ended that cop in 2 seconds flat, but she handled it like a pro. That officer needs to be fired, period. Cindy wasn't surprised. She had seen stories like this play out before, just never with her at the center. She scrolled further and saw a news update. Breaking: Baton Rouge PD launches internal investigation into Officer Brent Holloway following viral video. Her lips pressed into a tight line. That was fast. Then her phone rang. She almost let it go to voicemail until she saw the name. Sergeant William Tate. She answered. "Sergeant." "Lieutenant Wilson," Tate greeted. "I figured you might need a heads up." "I saw the news," Cindy replied. "They're investigating Holloway." Tate exhaled. "Yeah, and it's worse than that. The brass is furious. This video made it to the mayor's desk. The department's got the press breathing down their necks, and Chief Morgan ain't happy." Cindy leaned back in her chair. "So what happens now?" There was a pause. "Holloway's on suspension," Tate finally said, "pending the investigation, but I got a feeling this isn't over for him." Cindy smirked. "Good." Tate chuckled. "Figured you'd say that." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Miss Etta wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and moved to answer it. Cindy stood, her instincts sharp. The door swung open, revealing 2 men in uniform. One was an older officer, late 50s, salt and pepper mustache, a weary look in his eyes. The other Brent Holloway. Cindy's expression didn't change. "Ms. Wilson," the older officer said, tipping his hat slightly. "I'm Captain Ray Monroe, Baton Rouge PD." He gestured toward Holloway. "You already know Officer Holloway." Cindy folded her arms. "Yeah, we've met." Holloway's jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff. Monroe sighed. "We need to talk." Miss Etta glanced at Cindy, then stepped aside. "Y'all better keep this respectful," she warned, then disappeared into the kitchen. Cindy gestured to the small sitting area. "Go ahead, Captain." Monroe sat, but Holloway remained standing. Cindy didn't bother offering him a seat. Monroe cleared his throat. "I get right to it. This situation is bad for Holloway, for the department." He met Cindy's gaze. "For the city." Cindy said nothing. Monroe sighed. "The mayor is pushing for action. The chief is under pressure to make an example of someone. There's talk of termination." Cindy glanced at Holloway, whose face remained unreadable, though his fists twitched at his sides. Monroe continued. "I'm here because Holloway requested to speak with you." That caught Cindy off guard. She raised her brow. "Did he?" Monroe nodded. "Said he had something to say." Cindy turned to Holloway. "Go ahead, then." The tension in the room thickened. Holloway inhaled sharply, his throat bobbing as if swallowing pride was a painful process. He stopped, adjusted his stance, his mouth pressed into a hard line before he exhaled slowly. "I shouldn't have stopped you." Cindy tilted her head slightly, waiting. Holloway looked like he was chewing on glass. "And I overreacted." Cindy let the silence stretch, watching him. Monroe cleared his throat. "He means he's sorry." Cindy's lips curled slightly. "He can say it himself." Holloway's jaw ticked. A muscle in his neck flexed. Finally he muttered, "I'm sorry." Cindy leaned forward slightly. "For what?" Holloway looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "For," he exhaled, "for profiling you, for escalating, for being," his hands flexed at his sides, "for being wrong." Cindy held his gaze. "Are you apologizing because you mean it, or because you got caught?" Holloway didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "Both." Cindy nodded slowly. Monroe sighed in relief. "That's something, at least." Cindy's fingers tapped against the arm of the chair. "So, what now?" Monroe hesitated. "We're discussing disciplinary action, but," he looked at her carefully, "would you be willing to give a statement? If you say you accept the apology, it could help." Cindy arched a brow. "Help who?" Monroe shifted. It could mean the difference between Holloway losing his badge or just facing a suspension. Holloway's eyes flickered with something, hope, maybe. Cindy studied him. She had the power now, and she had a choice. She could let him crash and burn, let the department make an example out of him. Or she could do something unexpected. After a long moment, she exhaled. "I'll think about it." Holloway's shoulders deflated slightly, but he nodded. Monroe stood. "That's fair." Cindy stood as well. "But let me make one thing clear." Holloway looked at her. "If you ever pull something like this again," she said, voice steady, firm, "I won't just let the internet handle you. I'll make sure you never wear a badge again." Holloway swallowed hard. "Understood." Monroe gave a small nod. "Appreciate your time, Lieutenant." Cindy didn't respond. She just watched as they left. As the door clicked shut, Miss Etta peeked in from the kitchen. "They gone?" Cindy smirked. "Yeah, Grandma, they're gone." Miss Etta shook her head. "They sure had some nerve coming to my house." Cindy chuckled, but the weight of the moment settled over her. The ball was in her court now. And the next move? That was hers to make. Cindy Wilson wasn't the type to let things go easily. She had spent her life fighting for what was right, and she had never been one to back down in the face of injustice. But as she sat in her grandmother's living room, staring at her phone, she wondered if there was a better way to win this fight. The department had reached out again. Officer Holloway was still on suspension, and the city was split. Half of Baton Rouge wanted him fired, and the other half, the usual crowd, claimed he had just been doing his job. Cindy wasn't naive. She knew how these things played out. She had seen cops get away with much worse, walking free with nothing but a slap on the wrist. But she also knew she had power now. Power she hadn't asked for. Power she could wield in a way that would actually make a difference. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she finally made the call. The line rang twice before Sergeant William Tate picked up. "Lieutenant Wilson," Tate greeted. "I had a feeling I'd be hearing from you." Cindy smirked. "You always seem to know what's coming, huh?" "A good officer always does." Tate's tone was easy, but there was an edge of curiosity. "So, what's the verdict?" Cindy took a breath. "I'll make a statement, but I want it on my terms." There was a pause. Then Tate chuckled. "I figured as much." "All right, what are you thinking?" "I want him to sit down with me, on camera." Tate let out a slow whistle. "You sure about that?" Cindy leaned back against the couch. "If he's serious about change, then this is part of it. The community deserves more than a press release and a weak apology. He needs to face what he did, and he needs to say it in front of everyone." Tate sighed. "Damn, Wilson. You're really making him eat his pride, huh?" Cindy's lips curled. "He had no problem trying to humiliate me in the street. Consider this his education." Tate was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll set it up." 2 days later, Cindy found herself sitting across from Brent Holloway in a small community center, cameras pointed at them. The air between them was tense but controlled. He wasn't in uniform. That had been one of her conditions. He would sit here as a man, not an officer hiding behind a badge. A local journalist, Tanya Reynolds, sat between them. She adjusted her microphone and nodded at both of them. "We're ready to begin." Cindy met Holloway's eyes. He looked uncomfortable, stiff, but not angry. Maybe that was something. Tanya turned to Cindy. "Lieutenant Wilson, why did you agree to this sit-down?" Cindy folded her hands. "Because I believe in accountability. Because I know what it's like to be judged before you even speak. And because I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else." Tanya nodded, then looked at Holloway. "Officer Holloway." She hesitated, then corrected herself. "Mr. Holloway. You requested to speak directly to Lieutenant Wilson. Why?" Holloway swallowed. He shifted in his seat. "Because I was wrong." The room was silent. Tanya tilted her head. "Wrong how?" Holloway exhaled. "I profiled her. I let my bias control the situation. I saw her as a threat when there was no threat, and when I realized I was wrong, instead of stopping, I escalated. I wanted to win, to prove something, when there was nothing to prove." Cindy didn't blink. She let him speak. "I've been in law enforcement for years," Holloway continued, "and I've convinced myself that being cautious means being prepared. But that's not what I was doing that day. I wasn't being cautious. I was being prejudiced." The words were heavy. Tanya turned to Cindy. "Lieutenant Wilson, what do you say to that?" Cindy studied Holloway for a moment. "I say it's a start." Holloway's jaw tightened. He nodded like he expected that. Tanya pressed on. "Do you forgive him?" Cindy didn't answer immediately. Then, finally, she said, "Forgiveness isn't mine to give. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been in my position and didn't have a camera recording. It's about the people who didn't get an apology because their story didn't go viral. It's about making sure this isn't just words." Holloway looked down at his hands. Tanya turned to him. "What do you say to that?" Holloway looked up. "She's right." Tanya glanced at Cindy. "And what would it take for this not to be just words?" Cindy leaned forward. "I want action. I want training that actually works. I want officers to be held accountable before it takes a viral video to force change. I want a department that protects and serves everyone, not just the people they're comfortable with." Tanya nodded. "And do you think this is possible?" Cindy exhaled. "I think it has to be." The interview ended, and the video was posted that same night. The response was immediate. Some people called it performative. Others praised Holloway for admitting his mistakes. But what mattered most to Cindy was the conversation it started. The city council pushed for new de-escalation training for officers. The police department announced a partnership with community leaders to review policies on racial profiling. And Holloway? He resigned. Not because he was forced to, because he knew he wasn't the man for the job anymore. A week after the interview, Cindy got a letter in the mail. No return address, just her name written neatly on the front. She opened it and read, "Lieutenant Wilson, I won't ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know that I hear you. I hear everything you said, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I do better. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." No signature. Cindy folded the letter and set it on the table. Miss Etta walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Something important?" Cindy smiled. "Just proof that sometimes people do change." Miss Etta sat across from her, nodding. "Well, baby, if anybody was gonna make him, it'd be you." Cindy chuckled. "Guess so." She glanced out the window, the sun setting over the neighborhood she grew up in. She had come home expecting nothing more than a quiet visit. Instead, she had made a difference. And that was worth everything.